can you also shed some light on what Kautilya says in his Arthashastra? And
Yes.
We have Patanjali's Mahabhashya, which
So,
tells us about the worship of Krishna.
yes. So can I take Patanjali first?
Ji.
Because Patanjali is linked to Panini. Though, of course, Patanjali is later, he is around the 2nd century before Common Era. And the thing about Patanjali is that he's supposed to have been an inhabitant of Mathura. Supposed to have lived in Mathura or near Mathura. Now, Patanjali, he is also writing, explaining the rules of Panini. And he, in his text, Mahabhashya, he gives 7 examples. And all those 7 examples are related to incidents in the life of Krishna. So that again reinforces the argument that Krishna, again, I'm making the same point that when we give examples which don't need an explanation. We give examples which are accessible to everyone and which everyone knows about. That is why we give examples, so that it reaches the audience. And Patanjali gives 7 examples, and all those 7 examples which he gives of rules of grammar, they're related to incidents from the life of Krishna. So like Krishna killing Kans. So this is very, very powerful evidence that Krishna worship was quite widespread before the Common Era. And you mentioned Kautilya's Arthashastra. I would just like to mention one interesting thing that I found in Kautilya's Arthashastra. Of course, there are references to temples, how worship is done in temples. Temples, for every city has a temple, temples. And there's a plethora of evidence on temples and the forms of worship in the Arthashastra. But, according to me, what I found most interesting, that Kautilya has a chapter on charms, magic, and spells. So he gives an example that there is a mantra or a spell, and when you chant that, it induces sleep. Now, this is very, very interesting, because we are all familiar with this story that when Krishna was born, the entire Mathura went off to sleep. So the prison guards went to sleep, and how the father could easily take baby Krishna out of the prison and take him to safety. So Kautilya mentioning that there are spells which induce sleep. So, obviously this story was also very well known in Kautilya's time. Why would he mention it? The thing is that over the last half decade or so, we have actually lost touch with our sacred texts, and we have been taught to regard them as not to regard them as seriously, as serious stuff, and to dismiss them as, myths or not to be taken seriously. But how can you dismiss all these writers of before Common Era? And they never knew that this is going to be a subject of debate 2000 years later. They just wrote what was the current general knowledge at that time. And for Kautilya to say that these spells induce sleep is something which is, I think, very, very fascinating. At least I found it very fascinating. And can I just give one more example before Common Era? 2 examples I want to give. One is Megasthenes. Megasthenes was the Greek ambassador to the court of Chandragupta Maurya. And of course, his book has not survived intact. Only bits and pieces have survived. But in that book, Megasthenes mentions Mathura as the land of the Vrishni clan. The Vrishnis, we know that Krishna and his family were from the Vrishni, clan, and Megasthenes, who's an outsider. He did not invent anything. He wrote only what he heard and what he saw. So for Megasthenes to identify Mathura with Krishna is also very, very important piece of evidence which we cannot look away. And final evidence that I want to mention, if I may, when Alexander attacked India, also before Common Era, and he, according to historians who wrote at that time, they wrote that when Porus's army was marching to confront Alexander, they carried an image of Krishna before them, because that image would be the surest incentive for the soldiers to defend the image and to fight the enemy. So imagine at the time of Alexander's invasion, they are saying that Porus's army carried an image of Krishna. So, we can ignore all this evidence at our peril. Again, I want to repeat, for the believers of Krishna, this has no interest because they are not bothered. This is a debate which concerns educated, so-called educated, because we've all been miseducated actually. So, this is a debate for them, for the people. Krishna is a fact of life. But academics go on debating, was there a Krishna, was there not a Krishna? But I'm just making the point that all this evidence before Common Era, that means this evidence is more than 2000 years old. It has not been touched or tampered with, and nobody till now has questioned the authenticity of this information. So when we put this together, we do get a picture which we can ignore at our peril, isn't it?